Hello, you wonderful people. It's Friday. You know what time it is? What time is it, Flame?
TLF time.
It's TLF, Tier List Fridays. And today we're looking at Mythic plus DPS statistics. But we have a couple of disclaimers, right?
Of course, as always, guys, this is basically our perspective on the, analytics of all the specs and how they perform, what's the highest key that they've cleared and all of that. You can clearly see stuff like the performance for all Mythic plus dungeons where all the specs are almost equal, so they can all clear 15s, and all of the specs have currently, from this week onward, cleared 20s and higher.
So whatever spec you are playing, you can clear a 20 and higher. So that being said, I think it's safe to say that any of these specs, regardless of where we place them on the tier list, can do very, very, very well. All right?
Yeah.
Play what you love. Remember that. Because we like to keep these tier lists as safe as possible.
And what can be safer than using NordVPN? Listen, now more than ever, you want all of your internet surfing to be safe and anonymous, and really there's no valid reason to not use a VPN. That old myth that it slows down your connection is long gone, and NordVPN has like over 5,500 servers in 60 different countries, so it's super fast.
NordVPN will secure your internet traffic, and it will encrypt it twice, because it has double data encryption. And it will reroute it through a remote server. It's one of the best and most secure ways you can protect yourself on the internet, making your traffic anonymous and never providing data to your ISP for ads and other unwanted stuff.
Yeah.
Or maybe you want to get rid of region locking on Netflix or HBO Go? No problem. Just connect to a server from the country you want to watch the shows in, and you're Gucci. Now, because of NordVPN's birthday, for every purchase of a 2-year plan, you get 1 additional month free and a surprise gift. Just go to nordvpn.com/Marcelian and use the code Marcelian. It's that easy. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and they have some of the best and most amazing customer support who's there to help you out 24/7.
We use NordVPN for all our internet shenanigans, and we cannot recommend them enough. Thank you to them for keeping us safe from nosy internet sharks and for making this video possible. Now let's see what's possible with Assassination Rogue.
Assassination Rogue, how about that?
Well, it's safe to say that Assassination Rogues are kind of... Shut up, man!
It's good.
Assassination Rogues are kind of waiting for buffs tremendously, but like we did mention earlier, all of the specs can clear 20s, and right now the best key for Assassination Rogues is plus 20 Spires of Ascension.
Spires of Ascension,
It
all right.
seems like Spires of Ascension is one of the easier keys. It's very, very common. Obviously, guys, so this is like the highest key that Assassination can clear. All right, I get it. But it also matters what kind of comp you have, what kind of players you're playing with. Obviously, you cannot just pug plus 20s, I don't think.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to pug it, especially as Assassination Rogue. Now, the thing about Assassination is not going into deep about it. Well, it's first of all, it's still a rogue. You still have things like Shroud, and Blind and Kidneys, and you have the consistent damage from the bleeds and the poisons and stuff. That being said, the overall output isn't that great when compared to maybe Outlaw, or I don't know, even Feral in terms of bleed and stuff. So it's not seeing like the best times, but once again, depending on the comp, depending on what you have looking forward, and the affixes as well, there's a lot of dependables on this. But overall, Assassination Rogue, even though it's pretty low on the list, it can do great.
As any other spec, Assassination Rogue is kind of the worst performing spec for Rogue right now.
Yeah.
But with the 2 other really good specs, the Rogue is in a solid state, and even you can play Assassination, even if it's a
D tier, but once again, a D tier who can do plus 20. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, this is where we're starting from. Now, what's next, man?
Frost Mage, oh baby, Frost Mage. Now, Frost Mage is doing better than Assassination Rogue in terms of what number of what the key number is. Biggest is plus 22.
22 Halls of Atonement.
Yeah, and Halls of Atonement is another dungeon who, I mean, it's not that hard because it's like.
It's actually Frost is actually good there because obviously one of Frost's biggest addition to a group is the slow, the constant slow for every pick.
You know it.
You want your tank to kite, right? Obviously, each tank can use Frost Mage better or worse.
And it's good, the kiting is long, especially good in halls because of the fucking hounds and shit. And
with the dogs, because when you get to like a high key, you really want to pull a lot, because otherwise you won't finish the key in time if you just go pack by pack. And
True.
as a tank, you really cannot pull big packs in Hoswald Summon because of the dogs, the bleeds, we all know that.
Oh,
but
they
with
hurt.
the Slow for Frost and any other kit that anything else can bring, any other class can bring into your group of like at that level of key. I know what I'm saying, man. The addition of the slows are pretty good. And obviously it has all the good Mage goodies like Time Warp and food for your healing and all of that.
That's good, you know, CC's like polymorph, so definitely on a good tier. Do we still keep it in D tier?
No. I
Frost
think
Mage, or we raise it up?
with the 22 key, I think it's we're gonna bring it to like
to
up
a
to
B tier for...
It's a Mage spec, so Mage is always
definitely good. Okay, and similar to Frost Mage, we can look at Distro Lock, similar in terms of the highest key they can push out. Currently, we're looking at the biggest
22 Necrotic Wake.
Necrotic Wake, and we talked about Distro Lock previously in our Mythic Plus, I think it was a month ago, our Mythic Plus tier list. It's really good for cleaving, because, you know, Distro, what is it, the Chaos Bolt Splitter rule?
Well, that's one thing, but I think one of the strongest points of Distro is the Rain of Fire damage.
Rain of Fire, yes,
and
that deals amount.
I haven't actually checked to see if the 22 key level Distro Warlocks play Channel Demon Fire, but I've seen a lot of Warlocks play Demon Fire in AoE, at least in raid, so I can assume it translates to Mythic Plus in some way, but with that, even without that, Distro Warlocks have a lot of really good AoE, and it's all about the damage output. The damage output is clearly enough to clear 22. It has the Warlock goodies like Hellstones, which is really good, Gates to do a lot of skips, like we know a specific skip we won't mention because we don't want to make people sad, but let's just say you can do some quirky things if you're pretty creative with your Warlock.
It's looking pretty good in terms of performance. The damage is there, and in terms of placement, I think it's still in the B tier right now.
It's a B tier. I'm not sure exactly if it's better than Frost or not. We're not really interested in that because if it can clear at 22, does it matter if it clears at 1 minute faster than a Frost Mage?
I just feel like as a Frost Mage, I would just add the fact that it can bring a tad more utility than the Distro Lock. So I think the Frost Mage will take its spot in front, but really close into the B tier nevertheless.
Yeah.
Okay, now a spec that has risen since
like
the launch of
Phoenix from Deja. I think I've said that before. Deja Vu?
I don't know. Fury Warrior, Rejoice. Oh my god, Fury Warriors are doing so good right now, both in raiding and dungeons, but we are talking dungeons right now. And the biggest key they pushed, plus 23, still Necrotic Wake.
Yeah.
And you're playing Fury recently.
Yes, I've been dabbling into Fury. It's actually really fun. I think one of the major selling points of Fury right now, if you're interested in playing, obviously it's doing pretty good, but the legendary adds that extra layer of depth that I have personally been wanting on the Fury Warrior, because it was just pretty vanilla, build rage, spend rage, build rage, spend rage, but with the added effect of the Signet of the Tormented Kings, you can, you know, rotate your cooldowns and be a little bit crazy. It has a little bit of RNG, which is actually just enough RNG to make it interesting and not feel like Enhancement Shaman was like, oh my god, am I getting a proc or not?
Yeah.
So obviously, Warrior is pretty good with the Battle Shout. People want Battle Shout. It has consistent high AoE damage, which is pretty good, and you can do a lot of bursts with Recklessness and Blade Storm.
Yeah. And it's a very smooth spec to play still. It can dish out, you know, the numbers are there, but I don't know, you talked about spending, you know, generating range spending. A lot of people like that. A lot of people like that old school fantasy of
that's
the warrior.
fine, but if it's just that, then it's a little bit boring. It can get tedious, but then again, that's personal opinion. We're mostly talking here about performance. Obviously, it has the warrior goodness. Spell Reflect is actually really good. You can reflect, you can reflect the missile things from the Prideful that shoots out from other players if somebody just positioned properly. That's also really good. You can reflect some of the boss mechanics. You can just have magic damage reduction, which is really good, on top of War Paint, which adds a solid damage reduction, 10% damage reduction when you're enraged, and depending on your covenant, you might get some other bonuses as well. But I think Fury's doing a little bit better.
Pretty consistent.
One of the best melee specs
Definitely
right now,
an A tier right now in Mythic Plus for sure. So if you're playing a warrior, oh man, good times for you. And I think even better times are looking ahead. But let's move on to Havoc Demon Hunter. No, sorry, we're moving on to Arcane Mage. Arcane Mage, like we've worked on the guide recently, and we're gonna publish it soon. There's a couple of interesting things regarding. First of all, the biggest key on Arcane Mage has pushed, at least in the last week, is again a Necrotic Wake, but only 21 when compared to the previous 22 and 23.
Necrotic Wake is not a very easy dungeon anyway, but I feel like with the first boss, you kind of have a damage check. You cannot live too long unless you have a really good way of dealing with the little swarmy worms thingies.
That's what I said. Depending on the comp, things may change, right? And the swirly things are really, you really need some controlliness. But you do have
the damage is there. There are some difficult packs in Necrotic Wake, so the fact that the Arcane Mage can deal with that and still get a 21 done, it's a pretty clear indication that Arcane is in a different boat as opposed to BFA when we saw almost nobody play Arcane. And obviously, when it comes to classes like Mage, like Hunter, like Rogue, the fact that they have a spec that's way better than the rest will kind of skew the performance of the other ones.
It would always be the case with especially with classes like Mage, Druid, and you'll see. But so far so good, I believe. Again, another powerhouse within the Mage class. I believe right now it should be somewhere at the C tier.
The thing is, if let's say more really good fire mages would play Arcane, maybe you could rise up to B tier. But we kind of have to draw a line. It's like, okay, what are we looking at? So these are currently the statistics. The best Arcane Mage has cleared the 21, which is less than Frost, obviously, but a little bit more than Assassination. So if you like that Arcane boy, you can get that Arcane boy.
Doing good. I mean, I'm so happy that all of these specs now can do 20 plus. It's so amazing. All right. We were talking about, I tried to talk about Havoc Demon Hunter, but
But the structure of the video came
slapping me around. So Havoc Demon Hunter. Now I remember Havoc Demon Hunter being quite a beast in Mythic Plus in BFA.
I think it was similar to S tier.
Yeah. But looking at it now, so it didn't start off too great, but now it's pushing plus 23s. And the biggest key Havoc has done up until this week is a plus 23 Plaguefall, which is quite a contrast when we first started doing these tier lists and looking at Havoc. They didn't look that great. They did decent, but not that great.
Well, yeah,
really useful spec to have in your Mythic Plus group, no doubt.
Yeah, similar to Fury, it has a very high, consistent damage output. Obviously, it has really good cooldowns, but I think one of the biggest outlier here might just be the magic brand, demon brand thing, the 5% extra damage taken by enemies when you hit. Because obviously one of the top specs, without sugarcoating it too much, your World Bull is gonna be Fire Mage and Boomy, and having a Havoc Demon Hunter
plus 5%
is like imagine that the 5% of a Fire Mage's damage is actually yours, and 5% of a Fire Mage's damage is a lot of fucking damage, man. Same with Boomy as well, so you can take that upon yourself and be happy about it.
Yeah, but that being said, same argument as Fury. It's a super smooth spec to play, not that complicated at all. Super mobility, a lot of useful stuff for the whole group. So I think its place belongs into the A tier with Fury for sure, hands down.
23, baby.
Yeah, 23. I mean, plus 23 ain't nothing to sneeze at. Okay,
now
Arms Warrior.
Real man. Let's go.
Warrior. Well, Arms Warrior. I mean, apart from the fact that it tends to be sometimes a bit more slower, it's still dealing massive cleave damage.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And man, I mean, you played more on it.
I played a bit of Arms Warrior. There are clearly differences between Arms and Fury, at least when it comes to Mythic Plus.
I always felt Arms is a little bit more clunky, as opposed to Fury being much more smooth.
Yeah, Fury is definitely more smooth, just because of the way the spec plays, and range is still pretty good. The thing with Arms is that it doesn't have its burst that I feel as often as Fury and as reliable as Fury.
Yes, very true.
It is definitely way tankier though. Arms is definitely tankier, and obviously we didn't really touch on Intercept when it comes to Fury because it's a little bit dicey to use Intercept as Fury Warrior, but you can definitely use it as Arms. Because I personally played, Fury, but obviously it translates better to Arms, with a tank that was taking heavy damage, was constantly at 10% HP, and I intercepted 2 melee hits. I was down to 10% of 2 melee hits. Yeah. But those melee hits were not taken by the tank, and I could just heal it back up with Enraged Retribution. But with Arms, even better, you can use Die by the Sword, which is amazing. So if your tank is ever in Pearl, or if, let's say, somebody pulled aggro, you can intercept that person, stay next to them a little bit, and you'll take all of the melee attacks for a couple of seconds and pop that 100% parry and damage reduction, and you'll be Gucci. This is something that only really Arms Warrior can do.
Definitely. And the biggest key an Arms Warrior did last week is a plus 22 Plaguefall.
Yeah.
And this would place Arms somewhere in between C and B.
It's definitely B tier Arms Warrior. It's not. It's a smidge behind Fury, but it's definitely out there.
All right. Let's move it along to Demo Warlock.
All right.
With the biggest key being the other side, plus 21. Now, Demo Warlock, we saw a rise on it in the race, but in terms of like the Mythic Plus, it's kind of staying on the same page, or am I confusing?
Well, the thing is, obviously it has to contest with Destro and possibly Affliction. We'll see, we haven't gotten to Affliction yet.
Yeah.
The problem with Demo is that it's arguably the least mobile out of all of the Warlock specs, and that you will suffer a little bit for it. And I'm still iffy about Demonology's possibility of interrupting casts.
Right.
You obviously can stun them, and if you cannot stun them, you can kick them. That's kind of how the spell works. But as far as I know, and it has been aptly pointed to us, Demonology's biggest damage boost comes from scaling HP.
Yeah.
And obviously, the more gear you have, the better damage is. And I think it's doing overall a little bit better than the last time we did the Mythic Plus analysis.
Yeah, a little bit better for sure, yeah.
It's a little bit more straightforward. It's on the high consistent damage output side, but I don't think it has crazy burst. I mean, Tyrant is up pretty often, and with the explosion imp thingies, it's slipping my mind right now. It's still pretty good, and obviously has all the Warlock things.
But I think it's a safe C tier right now.
Yes,
Demo Warlock for
it's
sure.
clearing 21s. It's doing pretty good. It's not at the bottom of the barrel, and that being plenty.
Okay, let's move to one of my favorites, Subtlety Rogue, which we had a guide out. It's a guide out. You can check it out. Sub Rogue is one love letter to the Rogue fantasy in general. I believe it's like the most complete Rogue spec. It's doing really good in dungeons. I mean, for personal experience and stuff, you can AoE at least. You can pull a lot of good stuff, and single target. Don't even get me started on that. The biggest key a Sub Rogue has done in the last week is a plus 22 Halls of Atonement.
Yeah.
Which does place it somewhere in the B tier.
It's definitely in the B tier, yeah.
So definitely looking good. I know a lot of people have been complaining about Sub Rogue being nerfed multiple times, and it is true. I think it has been over nerfed. If you ask me, I mean the legendaries more specifically, but still in Mythic Plus you can do very, very, very well. And again, we can talk about the rogue utilities, like blind. And one really good thing about Sub Rogue is that you can use your Shadow Dance to always control big groups of mobs.
Yeah,
and I did
that's
this multiple
thing that
times.
The other rogue specs don't have.
Yeah, this is a plus for the Sub Rogue, because in your Shadow Dance you can like cheap shot 5 mobs, no problem, and you can help your tank that way. Needless to say, it's a really good spec, doing pretty good. Let's move along
to the Frost Decay. Oh
yes,
boy!
Frost Decay. All right.
Its highest key right now has been cleared as a 21 Halls of Atonement again. Frost Decay is seeing some pretty nice playstyles. If you're playing Breathless Ghost, obviously you can maintain it for a long time. That's a lot of AoE damage, but a lot of people don't like Breathless Ghost.
Like Stan, our boy Stan goes for that ice cap.
It's a lot of. I can understand it, right? It's been Frost Decay is maybe one of the specs in the game that has been most ignored by the devs in terms of, okay, what's new with the spec? Almost nothing new.
Yeah.
The addition of 200 obliterates is kind of like a, I wouldn't say it a meme, but like you said, it kind of like a love letter to the old school Frost Decays that wanted just big ass obliterates, and it still fulfills that fantasy, but it might just be a little bit lower behind dual wield. I think Frost Decay is okay. The Decay toolkit, the anti-magic zone is crazy good.
Oh yeah.
And obviously you have,
super good cleave as well, right?
Yeah, the cleave is pretty good. I feel like Frost Decay is just a weaker Unholy based in terms of its utility kit. Overall, the damage is never going to be as high as Unholy unless it's just superly overtuned just because of how Unholy scales. But it's doing pretty good, clearing 21s, and I think it goes really solidly into our C tier.
All right. BM Hunter up next, and it's it's clearing 20s, but the biggest key it pushed so far in terms of all these big keys, it's actually a plus 20 Mists of Turn Aside, which does makes it maybe in that same category with Assassination Rogue, although we have to say a good BM Hunter mastered by the proper hands.
Yeah, so I do okay. I don't do 20s, but the thing is with BM Hunters, it's easy to output the most potential out of your spec, so that frees you up to do other things. The problem is that the top damage that your spec can do is a little bit lower than the other Hunter specs, which kind of puts it in the 20 keys. It's still really good. Obviously, you bring Bloodlust that like almost no sacrifice, as opposed to Marksmen who kind of have to sag their damage a little bit for Bloodlust. And it's all the goody Hunter things, but it just doesn't have anything more. The numbers are already missing a little bit, but
in comparison to the other specs.
In terms of utility, it doesn't have anything other than what survival or marksmanship can bring. So.
Sure. I mean, at this point, I think it's safe to say to place it in a D tier for now.
I mean, it's good if you like having crazy pets. You're still gonna clear Like the potential of the spec sees it above 20.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't clear by now, guys, like the D tier is basically the classes that have cleared, you know, maximum 20. So that's very good in D tier.
You can probably see a pattern here, but it's you know, it is what it is.
Okay. And now for a very veiny shining star.
Veiny, pulsating with fiery
Oh
damage.
yes, Fire Mage. Okay, this is. I think this will be among our S tier contenders. Because Fire Mages right now are clearing plus 25 dungeons. And Plaguefall is the best dungeon they did so far on a plus 25. I mean, I think there's no surprise right now, and I'm not seeing any, I don't know, future nerfs for Fire. Not looking like they're gonna go away too soon. They're doing pretty good.
I still retain my my opinion that one of Fire's biggest assets, actually there's two biggest Fire assets that Fire has, is Flame Strike and Combustion being able to be reduced to like around 1 minute, 1 minute and a half cooldown. That brings it in like in 25s, I would imagine. The packs take a little bit to be killed, and obviously with your Fire Mage in a team, if the Fire Mage knows what he's doing and the tank knows what he's doing, you're probably gonna pull like 3 to 4 packs. It's one of the few comps that can actually do that, because Flame Strikes will hit everything. It's difficult to do that. That's why, like, let's say you kind of really have to know what you're doing on Fire Mage to be able to output that. So not every Fire Mage can be able to output that stuff. But
doing good.
it is essentially, I think, the highest DPS potential out of the entire game right now.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's doing pretty good in Rage too. But we'll get to that tier list in a month from now, something like that. Nevertheless, Fire Mages, you be rocking, keep on going. There's no problem. Okay, now next up, Enhancement Shaman. Would you look at that?
The Thunder Brothers. Man. The Enhancement has well, Shamans in general are, let's say, above average specs. Enhancement right now, I think it's clearing plus 23 Plaguefalls.
Yeah.
It's obviously, it's the Fury Havoc type argument over again.
But with much more buttons, man. Don't give me that shit.
Yeah, it's like, let's say it's one of the most busiest, if not the busiest melee specs I have personally played. I would probably put it against Sub Rogue in terms of how many buttons you actually have to keep in mind when pressing. But that aside,
keep that in mind.
It's it has a lot of AoE burst damage with Hailstorm, and it's not cooldown based, although like all of your rotational abilities have small cooldowns. Outside of that, Ascendance is pretty good. Will only happen once every 3 minutes, honestly, so it's not probably the main driver behind Enhancement, although you can really do high cleave. The problem that the Hailstorm doesn't hit more than 5 to 6 targets. I think it's 5. Will never, you know, make it to a Fire Mage place because the AoE is capped. But it's very solid, and obviously the Bloodlust, the Earth Elemental, all of that stuns are pretty good.
All right, so definitely placing it into an A tier.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. And what about his brother, the Elemental Shaman? I think we make the same argument.
Fairly similar. Surprisingly, Elemental is doing very competitive damage, at least when it comes to like high over 20 keys. Obviously, the highest has been 23, so that puts it close to Enhancement in the A tier.
Still in the A tier, yeah.
It does. I do want to say it might have a little bit less consistency in damage than Enhancement. At least when I played it, I felt that way. But obviously, things can scale differently in higher keys. But the main selling point is that the Earth Elemental is better. I think we said that before in other dungeons.
And very useful.
The Primal Elemental is with Earth Elemental survives a lot longer. It can actually help in constructing pools and routes for your tank. If your tank, is a pre-made and he knows that you can do that, he can pull like 1 or 2 packs more than normal. And if you have like another spec like a Fire Mage that that is not like capped in AoE, you can definitely use that to do some crazy stuff that are, other specs that are not AoE capped as much as the rest.
Now, so looking good, like Shaman's looking pretty good overall. Even Restoldo with this is a DPS, like all the Shaman specs right now are doing super good. Okay, let's move along to the Affliction Warlock, which has done a plus 22 Necrotic Wake as the biggest key. Now, Affliction Warlock, when you're comparing it to like Demo or Distro, I think it's, I don't know, it feels to me it's like the most intricate and also like the most consistent out of them all, just because of the playstyle.
I'm actually in the process of getting my Warlock back up, so all we know essentially is from analyzing the performance, and I think if I'm not mistaken, in the research for this video, I think the same Warlock cleared the 22 both as Destro and Affliction. I'm almost 90% sure, so I think it's the same person. I mean, you can see it on the screen right now, which we don't have access to that data at the moment, but Affliction is a solid B tier alongside the Destruction. The utility is pretty much the same across all 3 Warlock specs, so there's nothing new. It's basically how you want your damage to be. We could argue that Affliction has a little bit more mobility because you have a lot more instant dots to apply. You still have to like cast stuff. And even though as far as I've seen, Night Fae afflictions are like the best afflictions, you don't really channel the soul rot. You really just want, you channel the soul rot, but you don't channel the drain life, right? What it buffs. So as far as I know, Affliction is doing pretty good. It's a solid 22 solid B tier.
Okay, now let's move on into some more melee territory. Once again, the Windwalker Monk. Yeah, the punch, the fist, you know it, baby. Windwalker Monks this week have cleared plus 23 Plaguefall, which is quite a good feat. Thinking about how monks used to do in BFA and how they're performing currently, both in raids and in dungeons. I mean, think about it, like, monk in general is really good to have. Sorry a little bit for mischievers, not saying that much love and shit, but regardless. Windwalker monks, first of all, you have the super good cleave, like with fists, with the rushing jade spinning kick, well, whatever the fuck it's called.
Jade Wind,
and also the utility of the monk, which we always talk about it, but it's super important, especially in Mythic Plus. Like the fact that you can alter terrain, you can in-cap, Mystic Touch for other melees, off heals, teleport, like the mobility, we just don't need to go there, right?
Yeah, and you did touch on a very important factor, is that Brewmaster and Mistweaver are a little bit lower in the rankings. Obviously, Brewmaster is still pretty good in dungeons, but because Brewmaster and Mistweaver are a little bit less popular, you'll probably see a rise in Windwalkers as well, because you do want that 5% of physical damage debuff if you're playing stuff like, I don't know, Prot Warrior or Marksman, Outlaw, stuff like that. They would really benefit from that. But either way, the insane output that Windwalker has, I think its damage is maybe one of its main drivers
Of course.
It clearly deserves its place up in the A tier.
A tier for sure. Okay, let's move along to one of our favorites, both of us. Retribution Paladin, and the biggest key this week done by Reds is a plus 22 Plaguefall. You played it, so
oh my god, I've played it. I'm starting to play it a little bit lower, but I can definitely see the difference between how Red scales and how other classes scales, and it's actually really good to see Red doing this well. It has some crazy burst potentials, man. That what is it, Final Reckoning? Because I keep forgetting the name of it. The last talent is bonkers, and that is not a recap.
That's one thing. And another thing about Red Paladins is, like, so far, the utility, I mean, of course you can talk about the Paladin utility, whatever, but man, can it off heal. I mean, if you get into problems and stuff, you can basically use your kit to off heal. I know Prot Paladins can do that too, which is fine. You can have a Prot Paladin and a Red Paladin in the group, nobody dies basically. But yeah, huge ass burst, still problems with mobility, nothing,
Essentially think of that one situation when you're healing and one party member is just dying in the middle of your cast. Well, if you had a Red Paladin or essentially a really good hybrid healer as a Red Paladin, that person would have been saved. So that's kind of where the off-healing makes a difference. But obviously you have, the sack, which is really good. You can pop bubble on you and sacrifice the tank, and then all that damage goes into your shield, and that tank will take reduced damage, and that's really important because tanks are chunked, man. They're chunked.
Big problems. All right, so Retribution Paladin.
So definitely
in the B tier with the rest
stars,
of
with the ones that we love so much to see.
Okay, now let's move along to Outlaw Rogue, which I believe is yet another shining star of this tier list.
What's the highest key done?
Plus 25 Plaguefall.
Well, that puts it pretty high up there, like all the way up
I think it's S tier for sure. And you talked about, Enhancement having a lot of buttons and you comparing it to Sub Rogue.
Oh yeah, you've tested
now,
Outlaw.
Sub Rogue doesn't have as many buttons as Outlaw. The proper Outlaw build, especially for Mythic, or I would say for raiding it's even more. So Outlaw Rogue is not an easy spec to play. Now I've been convinced like that because in BFA it was much easier to play. The game played for you basically with.
I felt Assassination was simpler, but Outlaw was hard to get punished if you were fucking up.
There's a lot of intricacies within Outlaw. Obviously, the biggest factor of Outlaw right now is the AOE damage, which is insane. You got the Blade Rush, you got the Blade Flurry. You got Roll the Bones is so much better right now, man. You cannot believe it. I mean, first of all, the fact that Roll the Bones doesn't cost combo points anymore, just energy, like really good. You can basically open up with a roll the Bones and with a Mark for Dead, Slice and Dice. And you get smoothed out. And I love, what's beautiful about Outlaw? And I felt it now while playing. the fact that you have access to so many abilities because of the mechanic of Outlaw, like using all your stuff, reducing everything, it's amazing.
That's cool. And I think personally, as I've seen and played with rogues, I think Gauge is maybe one of the best souls that Outlaw has.
Definitely.
It's definitely something that no other rogue specs have, and that's
extra
on top of
CC.
the damage. Well, it's actually really important, man, because obviously it's an extra CC, but you need that because you think about, Necrotic Wake or that one cast that we just cannot get because everybody has their kicks on cooldown.
Sure. Overall, Outlaw Rogue deserves its place as an S tier, and it's
I think the best
amazing.
melee spec today.
Yeah. In this tier list for sure, and it's doing pretty great in raids too. Now let's check Shadow Priest and how it's doing.
Oh,
and
I started to play some Shadow.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to play. I love the new iteration of it. It's I would say it's not as easy as before because there are a couple of abilities more that you have to press and counter in and prioritize. But that being said, there's this stigma about Shadow Priest like traditionally not doing too great in Mythic Plus.
But the highest key that Shadow Priest cleared is a 23
Plaguefall out of all dungeons, and I mean Plaguefall, sure, it's not the easiest dungeon to tackle, and Shadow Priest is not the most mobile caster out of them all. But I gotta say, man, the fantasy of it, the playstyle, like if you go, because a lot of people recommend going to Surrender to Madness in Mythic Plus, and balancing that and that's like the skill cap of it, because you can die so easy. I tried it and I died a couple of times.
I think with the Shadow comes a lot of experience in playing that, because you kind of have to get a feel as like, okay, how quickly will this die?
Will it die? Oh,
will you just use it as a mob is dying and really not get the bonus, just the extension of Void Form? The Insanity Duration, I think it's really good, and Surrender to Madness is one of the things that I always wanted Shadow Priest to have in their meta and to be something that's good. But Hungering Void is also, let's say, a different way of extending Void Forms as much as possible. And although it scales off a little bit in big AoE, but as you get to like 23s, but before you get to that, you can definitely play Hungering Void and see how the new Void Form extension mechanic has been changed in Shadowlands if you haven't played Shadow yet.
No. Plus, all the utility you have the silences, you have the fears, you have the Shadowman's off heals, Vampiric Embrace. So definitely we can place this bad boy into, I guess, an A tier, because plus 23s. I mean, come on. Okay, let's move on to another love letter for both of us, the Survival Hunter.
Which has been so surprising once we did the research.
Man, we're super happy to see Survival doing so well. The biggest key they did this last week is a plus 22
Spires of Ascension.
That's what I was about to say.
That's what I was when we were doing the research for Survival. We were speaking with one of the bigger brains in Survival, and Thymine essentially said that what's really cool about Survival, and I've actually thought about it, but it makes a lot of sense, and it's coming up as Fury's best thing in Mythic Plus as well, is the Night Fateful Rain Soulbind trait First Strike, giving you a lot of crit once you start on targets that are basically full HP, all the way up to I think 70 or 75% HP.
Well, there you go.
Something like that, and that's where Survival shines, because it does a lot of upfront burst. Brust.
It's a brust,
which is similar to Fury, and obviously Fury is an A tier spec, but that's also why I think Survival is a very competitive AoE damage dealer.
Definitely.
Not only the utility, which is good, and obviously you bring Bloodlust at no downside as opposed to Marksmanship, similar to BM for that matter. But I feel like the AoE consistency and the AoE output damage is higher than BM.
Sure. So we can definitely push it into a B tier with
it's a B tier. It's a let's say this is the thing, right? Everybody shits on Survival a lot, and the highest key is a 22. But I feel like if a lot more marksmen had been playing Survival, maybe he would have been a B tier. But I think it's really close.
It's very at the edge of it, at the borders of it, still doing good. I mean, heck, again, guys, we're super happy that all the specs can perform at this level right now. Okay, now let's move along to the Feral Druid.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, my main for this spec. Now we all know, I mean, Feral mains know that AoE isn't like the shining spot for Feral Druids. And this shows into the performance. The biggest key of Feral Druid did this week was a plus 21 Necrotic Wake, which again,
I think is one of the keys that have the most priority targets that you have to kill.
Yeah, exactly.
Think of those liches that you just killed them and not yet.
I know. That's the thing. Regardless, I wouldn't say Feral needs love in the AoE department, because it really shines in single targets. So you can take you can break the spec down, and you can see like, okay, AoE not that much, but once you get to a boss fight or into Prideful and trying to kill the Prideful using cooldowns, you'll see Ferals like usually being top. and that's no joke in translation to raids as well. So yeah, of course we're gonna take the grand scheme of things on Feral, but once again, it's super fun to play. I cannot recommend it enough, and from what I understood, it's way better than what it was in BFA. I haven't played it in BFA. Yeah. And we have to place it into a C tier, I believe, right now, just because it hasn't cleared above 21s. But regardless, it's doing super good. Next up, Marksmanship.
One of the classes, I think one of the specs that turned the most amount of heads at the beginning of the expansion. Marksmanship, I think, right before Boomy and I think Fire Mages really started to kick off. A lot of people
they took the spot in the early days.
Well, the highest key that the Marksmanship cleared is a 23 Plaguefall. I think Plaguefall is maybe one on the easier side of dungeons when it comes to damage intake. But I mean, it's no surprise. Marksmanship just has a lot of damage, and with Volley being on a very short cooldown, you can essentially have that AoE burst on every pack of the dungeon, which is really necessary in Mythic Plus. And obviously, the higher the pool, the better Wild Spirits is, because Wild Spirits is just nuts.
It's too much.
But overall, Marksmanship is maybe not into an S tier because its AoE doesn't scale the way that Fire AoE does and Outlaw AoE does, and the other aspects will be an S tier. But I think Fire is a solid, Marksmanship is a solid A tier.
A tier for sure.
All the boys in A tier there.
Still, I mean, Marksman had a really good journey so far, and it's retaining its position.
The best Hunter spec. Wow.
So that's what it is. A very well-deserved A tier. And okay, now the next shining star is a caster, and what could it be? Could it be
Marcelian's favorite caster?
What is it?
Okay,
What is
it's the space chicken. It's the space chicken.
What is it? What is it? It's this.
Oh shit! You actually have
It's this.
All right,
it's the Boomkin.
The Boomkin is definitely
bonkers.
I know Marcel doesn't really like the spec that much, but I feel like it's one of the most satisfying casters to play. It's really interesting in dungeons, way more than it was in BFA. And obviously it has a buttload of damage. Most of it upfront from playing Kyrian, sorry, not playing Nightfall, although Kyrian is one of the better covenants for Boomy in Mythic Plus, but I really like the mastery burst from Nia when you pop that Convoke, and it's so really crazy.
It's good for all
Convoke is amazing in single target, but I feel like it's really cool to not have Convoke, pop Starfall, and just Lunar Strike and see you rise with every cast on the meters. That was one of the most satisfying things I did as a Boomkin.
Yeah, and I didn't like that.
And obviously it has all the good druidy things. You can go with Rest of Affinity and Heart of the Wild and actually do heal your group for a solid 45 seconds, and that's actually pretty good. You don't need to heal for the entire time. You just need to like put a couple of hots at Wild Growth, and that's about it, and you can just go do your thing. I was doing obviously a little bit lower keys, but when I was doing that, I actually didn't, the damage is so good that I just didn't drop from my #1 place. It's actually pretty good. So obviously Boomkin is
solid S tier.
Second best caster in the game.
Yeah, and the biggest key cleared was a plus 25 Plaguefall.
Oh, so we didn't mention that.
Yeah, it's you know it's high up there, no doubt. And I believe it's still well deserved. Just because we remember all the memes and the jokes and the discussion around Boomkins before the Shadowlands launch. Regardless, it's there. Rejoice, Boomies. Now, last spec to check within the tier list.
Decay.
Oh baby, Unholy Decay.
Yeah.
Now we can have the same kind of story with Unholy Decays. Like some of the kings have fallen a little bit just because other pumped it up. Because I remember Unholy being at the top. It's still doing pretty good. Don't get me wrong. Plus 22 Plaguefall being the biggest king.
That puts it way in B tier, I think.
It's a B tier for sure. I remember playing with pumps, bicep pumps. When the damage it was so
the thing
crazy.
is AoE scales really well with Unholy, so the more targets you have, the better Epidemic is, because Epidemic just melts shit. And one of the coolest things Unholy has in Shadowlands is that all of its cooldowns, except for Unholy Blight, are reduced by spending runic power or runes or just simply casting things. You one way or another, you will reduce your cooldowns, which make them come a lot faster. Obviously you have Army of the Dead, which was something that you probably used once or twice per dungeon. You can now use it almost at every other boss, so it's a lot, and even in big packs. I think Unholy might just be outshined by a lot of other better melee specs that don't have the downsides, because Unholy is still very immobile. Anti-Magic Zone is still pretty good, but it's obviously doing a little bit better than Frost. I feel like Unholy just didn't scale as fast and as high as the other specs, but it's still pretty good. It didn't receive any nerfs, and the AoE is crazy.
No, I mean, we're talking all these arguments and differences between classes at a plus 20 key level discussion. So any of these specs right here that you see right now on the final tier list. Any of these specs can do amazingly. Not even good, amazingly. All the specs can clear 20s.
Obviously they all clear 20s, and if you really want to understand like how well the specs are balanced from a plus 15 perspective, you can actually see the rankings from the Warcraft logs right now. In terms of performance, if you want to take a more general approach, they're all almost equal.
Yeah.
So when it comes to 15, if you want to like just get that mount, get that achievement, get that Keystone Masters achievement, you can play any DPS and you will be just fine. And the meta only really matters if you're trying to clear like 25.
Yeah, we can have the discussion on, you know, getting into maybe pug groups and, you know, pug groups being like, you know, the community perception for some of these specs, you know, oh, what are you, a feral druid? Oh, if you're not a boon, I'm not bringing you in. Same thing applies for like, you know, sub rogue. Go, you're a sub, you're not outlaw. We know about this. This is a problem, and this is what we're trying to do. One of the purposes of these TLF videos is to kind of change this community perception and get more specs in and players not be so rigid in LFG group. All right, so we know about the realities, we face them. Okay, I think like the best thing so far right now, if you play one of the quote-unquote underdogs, is, you know, find yourself a proper group or group of friends you can play with, and you'll do just fine. That being said, we want to thank first of all our Patreons for making possible these types of videos alongside our 2 class guides per week.
Love you so much.
Yeah, the Mocast podcast, which is making a return very soon with some new guests. And our Twitch gang, all our admins over there, our subs, our viewers, our followers, we love you to death. And
all of you.
We cannot forget our Discord family, you know.
Our Discord has been going pretty great, and you can find a lot of good information on our Discord regarding any class that you play, and I highly recommend you guys check it out.
Yeah, definitely. You know, big salute to all of our admins, you know, Cabal, Mochi, Stan, all of the people who help us out. You know, people who help us with the footage, like Patreons, like San and stuff. You know, T donating the fuck out of all of the streams. It's amazing. I'm pretty sure I'm missing somebody, but it's no one with bad intent. I'm talking too much. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a great weekend. Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.